today we are going to take a look at how to create something like this. We will start from the ground up, modeling our base shape, enriching it with a few ornaments and eventually creating complex composite structures. Stay then tuned until the end, enjoy the video, give it a like and subscribe to the channel for further content. Press Shift A and add a circle. Change the number of vertices to 16 as that's going to be enough. Tab into edit mode and press F to fill the shape and then I to inset. Hit B for box selecting the lower half, X and delete the selected faces. To avoid repeating the same operations on all sides, I'm deleting half of the mesh and using instead a mirror modifier on both the X and Y axis. Make sure the clipping option is ticked, otherwise overlying vertices will not merge. Now Alt-click to select the lower edge loop and E to extrude it on the Y-axis until it clips with its mirror part. At this point you can easily define the thickness of the arch just by moving the mesh on the Y-axis according to what your specific need is. Let's move on by adding an additional edge loop to our curvature with Ctrl-R. In this way we can manipulate the top vertices without disrupting what we modeled so far. Indeed, let's select the top edge and press S, Z and 0 to make it straight. By activating the snapping tool with vertex mode on, we can select a single vertex, move it along the relevant axis and hover the mouse over the vertex we want to align it to. By taking a look at what we have so far, we can see that the curved part of our mesh is a bit jagged since we do not have a lot of geometry. This could be fine depending on what your final goal is. In my case, since I'd like it to be smoother, I'm adding a subdivision modifier. We now have a smoother curvature, but we need to make our edges nice and sharp again. To do that, we could either manually add support loops, which is destructive, or we can do that non-destructively by using a bevel modifier. Let's place it above the subdiv modifier, reduce the distance and make it 2 new segments for each affected edge. I leave the mesh like this since I'm going to model something specific for the top part, while the side will be taken care of by the array modifier later on. If those rounded corners bother you, you can just select the corresponding edges and crease them to the max. Let's now work on the profile of our curvature. Select the face loop and E to extrude it on the Y-axis. Be aware that every time you extrude, you're creating a new geometry, and while that is generally fine, we want to remove these new faces at the bottom since they will not be visible anyway, and since having a clean outline on our mesh will make it much easier to unwrap at a later stage. I am then proceeding to extrude in and out with the same principles several sections of the arch, with the main goal of creating loops to be used later on for the placement of our embellishments. It's now time to work on the impost of our structure. To model such profiles, you can either use your imagination or leverage upon references such as this one I found on Pinterest. Now, when I model this kind of stuff, I prefer to start from a simple cube without touching any of its dimensions, since it is the easier way to ensure that all of our manipulations are uniform along all sides. Once placed into position, the groove is actually pretty simple. Hit E to extrude, right-click to cancel and S to scale. Every time you need to match a curvature, just Alt-click select the relevant edge and press Ctrl-B to bevel it. Remember that you can always double-tap G to slide the edge into position if needed. Once finished, I am adding a subsurf modifier and a bevel modifier, this time changing the method to weight and manually tweaking the bevel weight for each edge in the side panel. Once again, I'm going to use a mirror modifier on both the X and Y axis. Make sure that the side of the impost is ending right where the arch is, as to avoid problems with the array modifier later on. Sooner or later, you need to decide which scale to use. Especially in bigger projects, not using a uniform scale would make it problematic to establish the correct proportions among the different meshes. I'm going to use a real-world scale, and as a good rule of thumb, we know that the height of an arch can be defined as 4 times the radius of its original circumference. Take this edge and extrude it on the x-axis until it clips. Let's activate the edge length option in the overlays menu, select everything, tab into edit mode and change the pivot point to the 3D cursor. At this point, just scale everything until you reach the desired measurement for your radius, which in my case is 2 meters. We can now add a circle and scale it until it matches the circumference of our arch, then duplicate it and move it down. The lowest point is indicating where the floor should be. It is now time to create the base of our structure as displayed in the reference image. For the basement, I will follow the same principles used in modeling the impost. This time though, I'm going a bit more freestyle with its profile. For the column, I'm using a reference as well. To model the flutes, just select everything and press I twice to insert individual faces and extrude inward along the normals. Add a subdivision modifier and play with the edge loops to achieve the desired result. Crease the edges surrounding the flutes for a sharper result. Moving on to the top of our mesh, my goal is to model something like the displayed reference. With the base shape now in place, it is time to move to the fun part and add some embellishments. The first thing I want to do is to decorate our curvature with something like this. The idea here is to create space for our decorations by selecting the curvature, insetting individual faces and deleting the resulting selection. But as you can see, the moment we inset our faces, the smoothness in our curvature is gone. Let's then take a step further. Select the two face loops and press Shift-D to duplicate and P to make it a separate object. This will be our benchmark desired curvature. Let's select all its loose edges and crease them, as we need it to have the exact same shape as the original one. We can now select our original curvature and assign it to a vertex group. At this point we can proceed with insetting and deleting the faces. Let's add a shrink wrap modifier, target the benchmark curvature and make it effective only on the curved part by selecting in the modifier the vertex group we just created. Let's now isolate our curvature, select one of these diagonal edges, then from the menu select similar and lengths to get them all at once. We can now crease them to the max and we're done. We can now create our single decorations, which in this case I guess are called rosettes, by simply modeling over a reference. Once finished, we need to place our decorations along the curvature of the arch. The idea here is to use an array modifier along with a curve modifier. To create our guide, let's take the benchmark curvature mesh and run an edge loop through it. Shift-D to duplicate it and P to make it a separate object. We can now delete the edge loop from the mesh, select the new edge loop and convert it to a curve. Now it is just a matter of finding the right scale and positioning for the rosettes. For the arch itself, I want to create a few patterns along the lines of the displayed reference. Once modeled, the placement for each pattern will just follow the same principles used for the rosettes. Just repeat the process for all the patterns you wish to create. As you can see, here I'm using the classical egg and dart decoration also for the top of the columns. In this case, add an empty at the center of the column and make sure the origin point of your decoration is there as well, then use it as an offset in the array modifier applied to your decoration. I then used it again to embellish the top part of the arch. Here it is important that you try to place your decorations as to ensure that they would in any case style correctly when used along with an array modifier. Lastly, I'm giving a bit of additional details also to the impost, and I'm then proceeding to finalize the top part with a few more embellishments. Now that we have all of our pieces in place, let's take a look at how we can use our mesh into bigger structures. The first one would be the classical colonnade, pretty straightforward as it is just a straight array of single iterations. Let's start from our arch and give it an array modifier. Everything seems messed up, and that's because we need to apply the same modifier also to our benchmark curvature, which is functioning as a target for the shrink wrap modifier. But to make it work properly, we need our benchmark curvature and our main mesh to share the same boundaries. A simple trick to do that would be to take one of the edges, or even one vertex, and align it with the top far left and right geometry of the arch. Of course, the iterations of both arrays need to be the same. We could use the same process also for our decorations, but here we are instead going to use instances as to reduce the overall final number of polygons. But before doing that, I'm rearranging some of the embellishments to avoid potential merging problems. Instead of having cutouts, I'll use the full model on the left and none on the right. When placed aside, multiple instances should then look fine. Add a plane and make sure it has the exact same width of the arch. Place it into the decoration collection and make it the parent of all of the embellishments. Now in the Object Property tab under Instancing, select On Faces. At this point you can simply use an array modifier on it and you will have everything placed correctly, free of charges for your system. The second type of structure we will take a look at is the dome. For this one we will not use the top part. Take all your top decorations, move them into a different collection and disable it. Let's then apply our mirror modifier, select all our meshes and move them along the y-axis in edit mode. Let's now add an empty to the center of the world and a mirror modifier on both the x and y axis. Target the new empty and rotate it on the z axis by 45 degrees. For the plane holding the decorations, you'll need to apply the modifier and rotate by 90 degrees the side faces. Let's now apply the mirror modifier on the arch and let's connect the different profiles with 3 faces for each side. Then run an edge loop in the middle. Add a circle and give it 16 vertices and place it into position. It is very important that you check your normals here and make sure that they are coherent with the rest of the geometry. Now connect the circle with the rest of the mesh. We're almost there, but we need to solve some smoothness issues. Let's change the gizmo to normal, activate the snapping tool and align the vertices which are off of the curvature. To add the dome, let's take a sphere, again with 16 vertices, and cut it in half. Check your normals and connect it to the rest of the mesh. And that should be all. I hope you found this helpful. If you did, hit the subscribe button and give this video a like. Thanks for watching and see you next time.